I have been underground for 6 hours, and I have found something that is not on any map this company has ever filed with the state of Tennessee, and I need you to understand what that means before I tell you what is inside it. Because a cavern that is not on any map in an active limestone mine is not a geological surprise. It is not a survey error. It is not a pocket that the boring equipment missed. It is something that someone knew about and chose not to document, and the choosing not to document something 200 feet below the surface of the earth in an active mining operation is not an oversight. It is a decision, and decisions to hide things underground have a specific and limited range of reasons behind them. And none of the reasons in that range are reasons that make me feel better about the fact that I am standing at the entrance of this cavern at 3:22 in the morning with a heavy scaler and a headlamp and no radio signal and stone beds inside. And I said, stone beds. And I meant stone beds. And I need you to stay with me through every word of what comes next, because the stone beds are not the worst part, and you need to hear the worst part. And the worst part takes time to build too, and the building is the only way to understand what I found and what I think it means and why I have not gone back underground since that night. I am a night shift underground miner at the Gallatin Limestone Quarry operation in Sumner County, Tennessee, and I have been underground at this facility for 14 months, long enough to know the specific world that exists 200 feet below the surface of this particular section of Tennessee, which is a world of blasted limestone and diesel exhaust, and the smell of ozone from the electric equipment, and the specific compressed silence of an enclosed rock space that absorbs sound, differently from any surface environment, absorbs it and returns it changed, returns it as a version of itself that has been filtered through stone, and in that changed version of sound you learn, over 14 months, to hear everything that belongs and everything that does not. I know this underground. I know its sounds and its smells and its physical character and its geography, the geography that the company maps document, the geography that I carry in my operational memory from 14 months of shift work. And what I found at 3:22 in the morning was not in the operational memory and was not in any document I have ever been given access to. And the not being in the documents is the first thing that tells you this story is not an ordinary geological discovery. My job title is underground miner, heavy equipment, and my specific role on the night shift is heavy scaler operator, which means I operate the scaling machine, a hydraulic arm mounted on a crawler unit that goes into freshly blasted sections of the mine and knocks loose rock from the ceiling and walls before the production crews enter those sections. Because loose rock that falls without warning on a production crew is the kind of event that produces fatalities, and fatalities end operations. And so the scaler goes first. I go first into the new sections, into the blasted areas, and I pry loose everything that the blast dislodged but did not bring down, and the loose rock falls and the section is safe, and the production crews follow. This means I am frequently the first person into new sections of the mine. This means that 14 months of being the first person into new sections has given me a very specific relationship with the frontier of this operation, with the places that the mine is in the process of becoming before the production crews arrive, and with the particular quality of those places, which is the quality of rock that has not been exposed to air and human presence since it was formed. And that quality is real, is physical, is something you feel in the first minutes in a new section before the diesel and the bodies and the equipment traffic of production work change the air of the section into the air of a work space. The unwritten rules of night shift underground mining are the rules that the miners with serious tenure convey to the miners with less tenure in the way that all underground operational knowledge is conveyed, which is directly and without embellishment, and with the expectation that the recipient will treat the information with the seriousness it deserves because the environment it applies to does not allow for the consequences of not taking it seriously. My foreman on the night shift is a man named Aldous who has been underground at this facility for 19 years and who conveyed the unwritten rules to me in my second week in the specific tone of a person delivering operational safety information rather than superstition, because underground, the distinction between operational safety information and superstition is less clear than surface workers tend to assume, because the underground does things that surface experience does not prepare you for, and the rules that address those things are rules whether they fit neatly into the category of engineering or not. The first unwritten rule is about new sections. When you enter a section that has not been worked before, you do not enter alone without having logged your intended location with the surface communication system and without having confirmed that the section is on the operational map. If the section you intend to enter is not on the operational map, you do not enter it. You document its location as best you can from outside, and you report it at shift change and let the survey team assess it before any equipment goes in. This rule exists because unmapped sections have unknown structural integrity, because a cave that the survey did not document is a cave whose ceiling has not been evaluated, and a ceiling with unknown integrity above a heavy scalar and its operator is the specific configuration of unknown risk that underground mining protocols exist to prevent. I violated this rule. I am going to tell you why I violated it, and the telling is not an excuse. It is context, because the context explains the violation in the way that violations are usually explained in underground work, which is not by malice or ignorance, but by the specific cognitive state of a person 6 hours into a night shift in a new section of an underground mine, a state in which the familiarity of the work and the compressed geography of the space and the sustained focus required by the scalar operation produce a reduction in the peripheral awareness that the first unwritten rule requires. I was in the work. I was in the section. The entrance to the unmapped cavern was in the wall of the section I was working, was at the far end of a passage that the most recent blast had opened, and I drove the scalar to the end of the passage to assess the blast ceiling, and the entrance was there, and the passage was stable, and the entrance was approximately 8 feet wide and 6 feet tall, and my headlamp showed the interior, and what my headlamp showed made me get out of the scalar cab and walk to the entrance on foot, which is also a rule violation, and I walked to the entrance and I looked in. The cavern is natural. I know the difference between a natural limestone cavern and a blasted or bored space, and this is natural, is the product of the dissolution processes that create caverns in limestone geology, the slow work of slightly acidic groundwater moving through fractures in the rock over thousands or millions of years, dissolving the limestone along those fractures and opening the spaces that the water moves through into progressively larger voids. The cavern is approximately 40 feet wide and 20 feet tall at the entrance, and it goes back into the rock beyond the range of my headlamp, beyond the 60 or 70 feet that my headlamp reaches in the clear air of an unmineralized cavern, which tells me it is larger than any natural void I have encountered in 14 months of working this operation. The floor of the cavern is not the irregular, unworked floor of a natural limestone cave. Natural limestone cave floors have the character of the dissolution process that formed them: irregular, variable, sometimes pooled with water, sometimes choked with breakdown material from the ceiling. The floor of a space that formed without reference to the needs of anything that might want to use it as a floor. The floor of this cavern is level. Not perfectly level in the engineering sense, but level in the sense of having been worked, of having had the irregular surfaces reduced and the breakdown material cleared, and the whole floor brought to a consistent grade that is the grade of a floor that was prepared by hands. And the preparation is old, is not recent, is not the work of the current mining operation or any recent predecessor, is work that has the character of age, of something done long enough ago that the worked surfaces have reacquired the patina of the rock around them, the specific surface character of limestone that has been exposed to cave air for a very long time. The stone beds are along the walls. Not all the walls, the east and west walls, 7 along the east wall and 7 along the west wall, 14 in total, and they are what I said they are, which is beds, which is the only word that describes them. Stone platforms at approximately the height of a bed frame above the floor, approximately the length of a human body, approximately the width of a human body, carved from the limestone of the wall itself or constructed from limestone blocks that have been fitted together with a precision that, in the light of my headlamp, shows no gap between the fitted surfaces, no mortar, no joining compound. The precision of stone that has been shaped to fit other stone with a care and a skill that I do not have a context for in a limestone mine 200 feet below the surface of Tennessee. 14 stone beds, 7 and 7, along the east and west walls of a natural cavern with a prepared floor that is not on any operational map, and that I am the first person from this operation to enter. I walk into the cavern. I know I should not walk into the cavern, but I walk into the cavern because the stone beds are there, and the stone beds are the kind of thing that overrides the rule about unmapped sections in the specific cognitive state of a person who has just found something that should not exist. I walk in, and my headlamp illuminates the east wall beds first, and I walk along them, and I look at each one, and each one is the same. Is a stone platform at bed height at body length at body width, and the surfaces of the platforms are smoother than the surrounding limestone, are smoothed in the way that a surface is smoothed by repeated contact, by the pressure of weight over time, by the specific smoothing that a hard surface acquires when something has rested on it again and again over a long period. And the smoothing on the stone bed surfaces is the smoothing of something that rested on them not once, but many times, over a duration that the degree of smoothing suggests was not weeks or months but longer. At the 7th bed on the east wall I stop. The 7th bed is different from the first 6 in one specific way that I see when my headlamp crosses it, and that I take a step back from before I approach, because the difference is not subtle and is not the kind of thing that requires close examination to register. It is immediately apparent, is the first thing the headlamp shows me about this bed, and the first thing my brain processes about it. And the difference is that the 7th bed has marks on it. Not smooth marks, not the smoothing of repeated contact, but incised marks, cuts in the limestone surface of the platform, arranged in a pattern that covers the full surface of the bed from the head end to the foot end in a density that I cannot look at directly without the headlamp washing out the detail. And I angle my headlamp across the surface at a low angle to produce the raking light that makes incised marks on stone most visible. And in the raking light, the marks resolve from the general pattern of dense incisions into something that has structure, that has organization, that has the character of a system of marks rather than random cutting, that has, in the most honest description I can give it, the character of writing. Not writing in any script I can identify. I am not a linguist or an archaeologist, and I cannot tell you what writing system this resembles, or whether it resembles any known writing system. What I can tell you is that it has the organizational properties of writing, has repeating elements in varying combinations, has what appears to be directional organization, has the density and the spacing of a surface that has been used to record something, and it covers the full surface of the 7th stone bed on the east wall of an unmapped cavern 200 feet below the surface of Tennessee. And I photograph it with my phone for 40 minutes, every angle, every section, raking light, and direct light and the combination. 40 minutes of photography while the scaler sits at the entrance of the passage with its engine running. And then I stand up and I look at the full cavern in my headlamp. Look at the 14 beds, 7 and 7, and I look at the ceiling of the cavern, and the ceiling is what sends me out. The ceiling of the cavern has been worked. The same kind of working as the floor, the reduction of natural irregularity to something more intentional, the patina of age on the worked surfaces. But the ceiling working is not just leveling. The ceiling of the cavern has marks on it, not the incised writing of the seventh bed, marks that are larger, that are carved rather than incised, that are three-dimensional rather than linear, that project downward from the ceiling surface in low relief. And in my headlamp from the floor of the cavern, I look up at these marks, and I look at them for a long time, and the looking produces in me the understanding that the marks are faces, are representations of human faces in low relief on the ceiling of the cavern above the 14 stone beds, and I count them in my headlamp, and there are 14, one above each bed, and they are looking down at the beds with the specific downward orientation of faces that are positioned to look at what is below them, and they have been looking down at the beds for as long as the marks on the seventh bed have been looking up from the stone. I walk out of the cavern. I get into the scaler. I drive back to the main haulage road, and I key my radio, and I have signal on the haulage road, and I call my foreman, and I tell Aldous I need to talk to him at shift change. He asks if everything is okay. I say yes. Everything is not okay, but I say yes because the radio is a shared channel and the haulage road has other equipment on it. And the thing I found is not something I am going to describe on a shared radio channel at 3:40 in the morning before I have thought about what I found and what it means and what I am going to do about having violated 2 rules to find it. I drive back to my assigned section. I complete the scaling protocol for the areas I was assigned. I document my work in the shift log without mentioning the passage at the end of the new blast section, without mentioning the cavern, without mentioning the stone beds or the ceiling faces or the written surface of the seventh bed, because I am still deciding. At shift change, I talk to Aldous in the parking lot. Not inside, not at the shift change board, in the parking lot. In the pre-dawn Tennessee morning with the sound of the ventilation fans and the haulage vehicles and the ordinary sounds of a mining operation continuing around us. I tell him what I found. I tell him the passage location, the cavern dimensions, the stone beds, the ceiling, the seventh bed. Aldous listens to all of it without interrupting, which is not his usual mode. Aldous is a person who asks clarifying questions during any technical briefing. And is not interrupting is the first indication that the information I am giving him is landing in a different category from technical briefing information. He is quiet for a long time when I finish. Then he says, "You photographed it?" I say yes. He says, "Send me the photographs." I send him the photographs from my phone. He looks at them for a long time, scrolling through. And his face is the face of a person who is looking at something that he has a context for that he is not sharing, a recognition face, not a discovery face. And I say, "You knew." He looks up from the phone. He says, "No." He says, "I did not know." He says, "But there are stories." I say, "What stories?" He looks at the mine entrance, the portal, the opening in the earth that we both go into every night. He says, "The survey team that originally mapped this operation in the 1980s filed their standard report, and there was a geologist on the team who filed an addendum that was not included in the standard report and that the company addressed by removing the geologist from the project." He says, "The addendum described a void space in the section where you were working tonight." He says, "Nobody has talked about that addendum in 30 years. I say, "What did the addendum say about the void space?" Aldous looks at the mine entrance. He says that it had been used, that it showed evidence of long habitation, that whatever used it was not using it recently, but that the geologist recommended the section be taken off the operational map and flagged as a no-entry zone on the grounds that disturbing certain things in certain places underground was a category of disturbance that the mining industry did not have the framework to manage. I say, "And the company removed him from the project." Aldous says, "And the company removed him from the project, and the section went into the operational map as standard limestone geology, and here we are." I have not been back underground since that night. I filed for a medical leave, and the leave was granted without extensive questioning because the industry has mechanisms for that, and I used them. The photographs are on my phone. I have shown them to two people, Aldous and a friend who studies archaeology, and the archaeologist looked at the photographs for a long time and said the marks on the seventh bed are not consistent with any documented pre-Columbian North American writing system that they were aware of, and said the ceiling relief carvings are consistent with a funerary tradition, but not with any documented funerary tradition from this geographic region, and said the stone beds are the most interesting things they had ever seen in a photograph, and they wanted to go in, and I said no, and they asked why, and I said because whatever was in those beds is not in them anymore, and I do not know where it is, and I am not going back in until I do, and I may not go back in at all. The archaeologist said the bed surfaces showed evidence of very long repeated use. I said I know. They said, you understand what that means. I said I know what it means. They said, the preparation of the space, the floor, the ceiling, the beds, the written surface, points to a community of practice, to people who came to this space repeatedly over a very long period of time for a purpose. I said 14 beds. They said yes. I said 14 faces on the ceiling. They said yes. I said 1 face per bed. They said yes. I said, and the writing on the seventh bed. They said yes. I said, what was the seventh bed for? And the archaeologist was quiet for a long time, and then said, I think the seventh bed was for the person who kept the record. And I thought about that on the drive home, and I have been thinking about it since. About a record kept on stone 200 feet below Tennessee by whoever came to those beds in that cavern and lay in those beds in that dark, for whatever purpose required 14 beds, and 14 stone faces watching from above, and the record is still there, and the scaler is still at the entrance of the passage, and the mining operation is still running around the section I have not reported, and Aldous has not reported it either, and the section is still there, and I am not going back, and the photographs are on my phone, and the seventh bed is keeping its record in the dark, and whatever the record says I do not know, and I am going to keep not knowing. And that is the right decision, and I am keeping it. Story number 2. 500 feet below the surface of West Finley, Pennsylvania, I can hear something scratching from behind the rock face, and the scratching is not geological and is not mechanical and has been going on for 23 minutes, and I am alone in this section because my partner went topside 40 minutes ago with a suspected knee injury, and I stayed because the drill bit needs to be replaced, and a down drill means a down production section, means a loss per hour that the site supervisor does not accept without documentation that the maintenance tech on scene made every reasonable effort to effect repairs before requesting additional personnel, and I am effecting repairs, and the scratching is behind the rock face, and the rock face is coal, is a solid coal seam. My partner on tonight's shift is a man named Greg who has been at this operation for 11 months and who injured his knee on the ladder from level 3 to level 4, which is the descent ladder, a standard man-trip ladder that we use at the beginning and end of every shift, and which Greg has used without incident for 11 months, and which tonight produced a misstep on the third rung from the bottom that turned his knee in a direction knees do not accommodate, and which Greg managed to walk off for 40 minutes before the swelling made the walking off no longer viable. I told Greg to go topside, called the surface on the mine communication system to have a personnel carrier meet him at the bottom of the man hoist shaft, and stayed with the drill bit replacement because the drill bit replacement is what the section needs, and I can do a drill bit replacement alone, have done it alone multiple times, and the communication system gives me contact with the surface every 15 minutes on the check-in schedule, and I am not alone in the regulatory sense. I am alone in the operational sense, which is the sense that matters for the next 23 minutes. The unwritten rules of underground coal mine maintenance at night are the rules of sustained attention in a high-risk environment. The first is the air rule, which extends the formal methane monitoring protocol into a practice of continuous instrument awareness rather than scheduled checks, meaning your gas monitor is not something you check at intervals, but something you read continuously, something whose readings you are aware of the way you are aware of your own breathing. Because in a deep coal mine, the difference between a safe methane concentration and a dangerous one can close in minutes, and the response time between notification and effective action is not long, and the consequences of a delayed response are the kind of consequences that produce the fatality reports that define the industry's safety record. I am continuously aware of my gas monitor. I am continuously aware of it tonight. It is reading normal at every check during the 23 minutes of scratching. The second rule is the communication rule, which is more comprehensive than the formal check-in schedule requires, meaning you communicate with the surface more than every 15 minutes when anything unusual is happening. You do not wait for the check-in interval when the situation is changing. You use the communication system the way it was designed to be used, as a continuous link rather than a scheduled one. I followed this rule tonight. I reported the scratching to the surface at the 4-minute mark. The surface communication officer, a man named Hollis who has been at this operation for 14 years, acknowledged my report and said he would notify the site supervisor. He said this in the tone of a person who has received this kind of report before and who knows how it is going to be handled, which is how every unusual report from underground at night is handled at this operation, which is with acknowledgement and documentation and the entry of a geological settling event in the appropriate log. The third rule is the one Hollis gave me on my first week at this operation, gave me in the specific direct tone of someone delivering operational knowledge, not in the tone of someone sharing something they expected me to believe. He said, in Section 4, in the deeper sections off the Level 4 main entry, you will sometimes hear sounds from behind the coal seam that are not mechanical and are not geological in character. Sounds that the survey team has classified as gas pocket movement and that the experienced miners at this operation have classified as something else. And the something else is not something anyone at this operation is going to classify in a written document. And when you hear those sounds, you log your position, you maintain your check-in schedule, you do not go to the coal face, and you do not attempt to investigate the source of the sound from the face side. And you do your job, and you go topside when your job is done. I asked what the classification the miners use is. Hollis looked at me for a long time. He said, the miners say that the deep sections have residents. He said, I am not telling you that. I am telling you what the miners say. He said, the gas pocket classification is the classification that goes in the log. I said, has anyone investigated further? He said, the one person I know of who went to the face to investigate a sound in Section 4 is not working underground anymore. I asked where he was working. Hollis said, I don't know. I said, did he quit? Hollis said, he requested a surface-only assignment, and it was granted, and he is working somewhere on the surface, and as far as I know, he does not discuss what he saw at the coal face in Section 4, and nobody who works here asks him about it. I said, how long ago was that? Hollis said, 6 years. I said, does the sound still happen? He said, you will hear it if you work the deep sections long enough. He said, most people hear it within the first year. He said, it has been 6 years since someone went to the face to investigate, and that is not a coincidence. I said, the rule prevents people from going to the face. He said, the rule prevents people from going to the face. I am following the rule. I am at the drill bit, which is mounted on the continuous miner at the working face, which is the coal face, which is the surface of the coal seam that the production equipment has been cutting, and I am replacing the failed bit with the replacement bit from my maintenance kit, which is the job, and the scratching is coming from behind the coal face, from behind the solid coal of the seam, from the 60 feet of unbroken coal that the geological survey says is behind this face before the next void space. And the scratching has the specific character of something with edges moving against coal, the sound of resistance and progress, the sound of something working its way through material. And it has been doing this for 23 minutes at a pace that has been consistent and directional, that has been moving. In the 23 minutes, I have been tracking it from the left side of the face toward the right side of the face, toward my position, toward the drill bit and the continuous miner and me, and the directional movement of it is the thing that is making the rule the hardest rule I have ever followed. Because following a rule is easier when the rule is designed to protect you from is not moving toward you. I replace the drill bit. The replacement takes 11 minutes at the pace of careful work in a confined space, and I do every step correctly, and I check every fastener, and I verify the bit seating, and I do the work with the full attention that the work requires, and the scratching is present throughout and continues to move right. And I complete the replacement at the 27th minute of the scratching, and I log the completion in the maintenance record on my handheld unit. Log the replacement as complete, log the section as returned to operational status, log the time, and I key my radio for my check-in with the surface. Hollis answers. I report the drill bit replacement as complete, report my position, report that I am preparing to exit the section. Hollis acknowledges. He asks, "Did you hear anything tonight?" I say yes. He says, "Geological settling?" I say yes. He says, "Good." He says, "Come topside. The man hoist is ready." I gather my tools. I pack the maintenance kit. I stand up from the drill bit, and I look at the coal face, and the scratching is at the right edge of the face, at the far right end of the coal seam surface. And it is close, is from directly behind the coal at the right edge, and I look at the right edge of the coal face, and I watch, and the scratching continues, and the coal at the right edge of the face, the coal that I am looking at directly under my headlamp, moves. Not collapses, not falls, not the structural failure of a coal seam under geological pressure, which I know, and which is a specific and dramatic event, with specific and dramatic warning signs that the monitoring system tracks and that I have been trained to respond to. The coal at the right edge of the face moves in the way that material moves when something behind it is applying localized pressure, when something is pushing from the backside of a surface at a specific point, and the specific point is at the right edge of the face at approximately the height of my chest, and the pressure behind it is not the pressure of gas, is not the pressure of groundwater, is the pressure of something with a specific and localized application, the pressure of something pressing against the back of the coal face at the height of a human chest from a direction that the Geological Survey says is 60 feet of solid coal. I walk out of the section. I walk at the pace that the confined space allows, which is not running but is as close to running as the ceiling height and the floor conditions permit, and I do not look back, and I do not stop, and I am on the man hoist in 4 minutes, and at the surface in 9 minutes, and in the site supervisor's office in 14 minutes. And I give the site supervisor my maintenance log on the handheld unit, and the log says geological settling event, section 4 deep, drill bit replacement complete. Section returned to operational status, and the site supervisor reads the log and signs off on it, and tells me good work, and I go home. I have been on medical leave since. The leave is for a back strain that occurred during the drill bit replacement, and the back strain is real, is documented, is the result of the specific physical demands of maintenance work in confined underground spaces, and the leave has been granted, and I am using it, and I will return to work at the end of the leave. And I will not request a surface-only assignment, because the surface-only assignment requires an explanation, and the explanation I have is the explanation that the person 6 years ago had, and that he does not discuss, and I understand now why he does not discuss it. And when I return to work, I will follow the rules, all 3 of them, including the 3rd one, including the rule about not going to the face, and I will hear the scratching when I work the deep sections, and I will log it as geological settling, and I will complete my work, and I will go topside. And I will not watch the coal face at the right edge where the pressure comes from. and I will not think about what is 60 feet behind the coal seam that the geological survey says is solid, and I will do my job, and I will follow the rules. And the rules exist for the reason that Hollis told me they exist, and the reason is a good reason. And I know it is a good reason now in a way that I did not know it before the 27th minute of the scratching in section 4. And I am going back to work at the end of the leave, and I am following the rules. Story number 3. The figure in my headlights is white and naked and completely still, and it has been completely still for 41 seconds, and it is standing in the middle of a dirt access road in an oil field in the dark at 4 in the morning, and I have stopped the chemical truck because the figure is in the road, and the road is one lane, and I cannot go around it, and I am sitting in the cab of the chemical truck looking at the figure through the windshield from approximately 30 feet away, and the figure is human in shape, and the figure is not moving, and nothing about what I am looking at is something I have a context for, and I need you to stay with me through every second of what happens next, because what happens next is not the obvious thing, is not the thing that the setup makes you expect, is something worse than the obvious thing in a specific way that is worse not because of what the figure does, but because of what it does not do, and because of what I find when I do the thing that 41 seconds of staring through a windshield at a naked white figure in the dark eventually produces, which is getting out of the truck. I am an operator assistant trainee at a petroleum production operation in the Permian Basin region, working for a contract chemical services company that provides chemical treatment services to oil field operators. And I am in the 7th month of a 12-month training program that is converting me from a person with no oil field experience into a person qualified to operate the chemical injection systems and treatment programs that keep production wells producing at their rated capacity. The training program is specific and comprehensive and involves both classroom instruction in the chemistry and engineering of petroleum production and field training in the practical operation of the equipment and processes. And the field training happens on the night shift because the chemical treatment operations that I am training on are operations that run continuously and that require monitoring and adjustment around the clock, and that the training program assigns new trainees to on the overnight schedule, because the overnight schedule is where the most comprehensive exposure to the full range of conditions occurs, which is a polite way of saying that the night shift is where everything that can go wrong does go wrong, and that going wrong in the presence of a trainee is the fastest way to produce a competent operator. The oil field at night is an environment that I am still becoming calibrated to 7 months in, still developing the specific sensory understanding of a production field after dark, which is an environment of widely spaced lights and absolute dark between them, of the mechanical sound of pumping units and the hiss of gas lines and the smell of crude and produced water and the specific chemical smell of the treatment programs I am responsible for, all of it spread across a landscape of unpaved access roads and equipment pad sites and the flat or gently rolling terrain of the production area. Terrain that in daylight is industrial and comprehensible, and that at night becomes a different kind of space. A space where the distances between things are expanded by the dark and the lights of distant equipment are the only reference points, and where the road under your headlights is the only thing you can be certain of. My trainer on the overnight shift is a man named Cutter who has been working oil field chemical services for 16 years and who has the specific quality of total operational competence that 16 years in a demanding field produces, the quality of a person who has seen every failure mode and has developed a response to each, who operates without urgency because the urgency has been metabolized in a capability, who moves through the field at night with the ease of someone who knows exactly where they are in a landscape that disorientation makes dangerous. Cutter is not with me tonight. Cutter has a family situation that required him to leave the field at 11 p.m., and that the operations supervisor accommodated by assigning me a solo overnight with communication check-ins every 30 minutes and a clear protocol for the treatments I am responsible for, which are routine, which I have done with Cutter multiple times, which I am qualified to perform solo as of my month 5 assessment. It is my first solo overnight, and it is 4 in the morning, and the figure is in the road. The unwritten rules of oil field overnight work that Cutter gave me in the first week of my training are the rules that every experienced oil field worker knows, and that the safety orientation does not cover in their full operational depth. The first is the isolation rule. You do not go off-road at night without logging your position with the operations center and without a 2-hour check-in interval rather than the standard 30 minutes. Because off-road in an oil field at night is the specific configuration of terrain and darkness and distance from infrastructure that produces the outcomes that the oil field fatality statistics document most frequently. You stay on the access roads. You know where the roads go, and you stay on them. The second rule is the light rule. Your headlights and your body-mounted lights and your vehicle lights are not optional at night in the field, are not something you reduce or redirect for any reason. Because the light is what makes you visible to other equipment and what makes the field visible to you, and the visibility in both directions is what keeps you alive. You do not turn your lights off in the field at night. You do not reduce your lights. Full illumination, all the time, every vehicle, every movement. The third rule Cutter gave me sitting in the chemical truck at the end of my second week. Sitting in the parking area of a production facility at the end of a shift, sitting in the specific moment of the end of a shift in an oil field when the field around you is becoming the field of the next day's crew, and you have a minute to sit before driving out. He said, "You will see things on the access roads at night that you will not be able to explain. Not equipment, not wildlife, not the ordinary things that appear in headlights on rural roads at night. Things that do not fit the categories you have for the field." He said, "When you see those things, you stop the truck, you lock the doors, you call the operations center, and you wait for instructions." He said, "You do not get out of the truck." He said, "I have been doing this for 16 years in 3 different production areas, and the things on the roads at night in this field are things that a person who gets out of the truck to investigate does not get a second chance to not investigate." He said, "Stay in the truck. Always." I said, "What kinds of things?" He said, "The kind that do not move when they should move and the kind that move when they should not." He said, "Both kinds are dangerous in different ways, but the kind that does not move is the more dangerous one." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because the kind that does not move is waiting. The figure in my headlights is the kind that does not move. It has been 41 seconds, is now 47 seconds, is now 53 seconds, and the figure is white and naked and standing in the middle of the road in the complete stillness of something that is not experiencing the kind of surprise or fear or discomfort that a human being standing in a dirt road in an oil field in the dark at 4 in the morning would experience. And I am looking at it through the windshield, and I am thinking about the third rule, and I am reaching for my radio too. Call the operations center, and the radio is on the console between the seats, and I am reaching for it, and the figure does not move. I call the operations center. The overnight communications operator answers in 2 rings, and I give my vehicle number and my position, which I know from the GPS unit on the dash, and I say I have something in the road at my position and I need guidance. The operator says, "Describe what you are seeing." I describe the figure. White, approximately 6 feet tall, human shape, standing in the center of the road, not moving, facing the truck, visible in the headlights from approximately 30 feet. There is a pause on the line. The operator says, "How long has it been there?" I say, "I am now at 1 minute and 8 seconds since I stopped the truck." Another pause. The operator says, "Cutter left you a note in your trainee file for tonight." He says, "The note says that if you call in a stationary figure on the 17 road between pads 9 and 14, I am to tell you to reverse the truck slowly until you reach the pad 9 junction and to take the bypass road around to pad 14. I say, the note says specifically the 17 road between pads 9 and 14? The operator says yes. I say, how did Cutter know? The operator says, I don't know. He says, the note has been in the file since you were assigned to this route 6 weeks ago. I say, 6 weeks ago. He says, yes. I say, what does the rest of the note say? He says, the rest of the note says do not get out of the truck and do not wait for the figure to move, because it will not move until you do, and by then you will not want to see what the movement looks like. I put the truck in reverse. I reverse slowly on the dirt road, maintaining the headlights on the figure, watching it in the forward lights as I back away from it, and the figure does not move as I reverse, does not turn to track the truck, does not respond to the truck's movement in any way, stands in the road in the same position and the same complete stillness as I back the distance from 30 feet to 40 feet to 50 feet to 60 feet, and I reach the pad 9 junction and I turn the truck and I take the bypass road and I do not see the figure again that night. And I complete my treatments and I call Cutter at 6 in the morning when his family situation has resolved sufficiently for him to answer his phone, and I say, what is on the 17 road between pads 9 and 14? Cutter is quiet for a moment, and then he says, I don't know what it is. I say, you left me a note. He says, yes. I say, 6 weeks ago you left me a note about something you did not know I was going to see. He says, I have been working this route for 2 years. He says, the figure shows up on the 17 road approximately every 6 weeks. He says, I have seen it 4 times. He says, I left the note because your solo overnight was scheduled and the 6-week interval was due, and I did not want you to get out of the truck. I say, why does it appear every 6 weeks? He says, I don't know. I say, what is it? He says, I don't know. I say, have you ever waited to see what the movement looks like? He is quiet for a long time. He says, once. He says, in my first year on this route, before I knew the interval, before I knew the rule, I waited. I say, what happened? He says, I saw what the movement looks like. I say, what does it look like? He says, I am not going to tell you that. He says, I am going to tell you that I wrote the note 6 weeks ago so that you would not have to find out. And you did not get out of the truck, and you reversed at the pad 9 junction, and you took the bypass road. And that is the correct outcome. And I am going to tell you that the rule exists because of what the movement looks like, and that the rule is a good rule, and that you are going to keep following it. And that every 6 weeks on this route, you are going to see the figure on the 17 road, and you are going to reverse to the pad 9 junction and take the bypass, and you are going to be fine. I say, every 6 weeks for as long as I work this route. He says, yes. I say, what if I do not take the bypass? He says, then you will see what the movement looks like. He says, and you will not be fine. And I have not been on the 17 road between pads 9 and 14 since that night without Cutter in the truck, and Cutter and I take the bypass together every 6 weeks. And the figure is on the road when we pass the junction on the bypass, visible in the distance, white and still in the dark. And Cutter looks at it as we pass, and his face is the face of a person who has seen what the movement looks like and who has no interest in seeing it again. And I look at it, and my face is the face of a person who has not seen what the movement looks like and who intends to keep it that way. And we take the bypass, and we complete the treatments, and we go home in the morning, and the figure is on the 17 road, and we do not stop, and we do not wait, and we do not get out of the truck.